Now, latest woes for Donald Trump in the courtroom, not just the case in New York that he's facing over the hush money for Stormy Daniels, but of course he's got Supreme Court woes as well. And the US state of Arizona has also indicted 18 former advisors to Donald Trump, including former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, as part of an alleged plot to overturn the result of the 2020 presidential election. And the former president was not indicted, but he's labelled a co-conspirator by the court. Joining me now to talk about this, delighted to say, is Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Good afternoon to you once again.
See you, Julia.
I mean, it's difficult. There are four different cases that the former president is facing. The one case that we know is coming towards, has already started in New York, is involving the payment of hush money to Stormy Daniels, the porn star who alleged she had an affair with him. Again, not a crime in itself, right, but the claim is that campaign funds were used, misappropriated, and the business accounts were cooked to hide these payments.
Yeah,
that
falsification of business records. Not using campaign funds, by the way. If he had used campaign funds, then yeah, that might have been...
That was one of the original ones.
Right,
and frankly, it's difficult to keep up anymore.
Yeah, it is.
Now, but this is one of the issues we've got, is that he's been told you have to appear in court every day in New York. Yeah. And it stops him going out on the campaign trail. He was even moaning the other day, rather wonderfully. And it's cold, it's freezing in there, which I thought... I mean, that was just a classic tactic, maybe, to keep him awake. But of course, he's got this Supreme Court challenge. Explain what this case is in more detail, but also why this is coming to court now.
Yeah. So one of the indictments is regarding January 6th and whether he could be held criminally liable for his actions on January 6th. And what Trump is arguing before the case even starts, or before the trial even starts, is presidential immunity applicable here, and that's what the Supreme Court is deciding.
And his claim is that, I was the president, I can do what I want.
That's right, and there are statutes on the books that protect the president from civil or criminal lawsuits because...
And not just while they're in office.
Right.
But because January the 6th, although we'd already had Biden had been elected, Donald Trump was still claiming that the election was not won by Biden, but he was still president until January the 20th.
That's right, and so the argument is, that he was just acting as president and ensuring that the laws were executed properly and that the election was fair. So that's that's really the decision here, is whether they call it the outer limits. We've had a
ruling in courts already saying that no, you don't have a presidential immunity.
The lower courts did that because they're all Democrats, and this is just another example of Democrats violating the norms. They claim that he's this big threat to democracy, and yet they're really abandoning...
You say this every single time.
Sure.
You have a completely politicized judicial system where you have political appointees to the courts. We've got a Conservative majority. Is it a 6-3 majority?
6-3, yeah.
3 of those 6 being appointed by Donald Trump himself when he was in office.
That is correct.
That's kind of why the Christian right appointed him. They wanted the decision, which we'll talk about this in a moment, on abortion. They wanted him to appoint these judges to push through some of the key issues that were on that sort of Christian right evangelical agenda. Now, there's big doubts about whether or not the court that ostensibly should be a sort of Republican-supporting court, given who's appointed them, that they will actually back him on this. And that's because the idea of sort of complete immunity, the idea of the president, he could just come in this studio and machine gun all of us to death and go, yes, but I'm president, I can do what I want. That's absurd.
Right, and that's what they're going to opine on. There are limits to that. So, yes, there are... They should have some degree of presidential immunity. I think the court will judge based on statutes, based on the law. This court is not necessarily conservative in terms of issues. They're just conservative in terms of not legislating from the bench. So if you want law, and abortion's a good example. If you want law, go to the legislature and get the law executed, or written and approved, but don't legislate from the bench. And that's what's important about this court. They're very careful not to make decisions that are political decisions. They're there to make sure that those decisions are made by the legislature. So balance of power.
Yeah, that's interesting. In terms of this case now, Donald Trump has been told, no, you can't go probably to your youngest son's graduation from high school. Whether that, we haven't been told yet whether he can or he can't. He claimed he hasn't been told that, but we'll wait and see. I think the judge will probably renege on that because I think your average parent would actually be quite there. Yeah, exactly. That's just vindictive.
Right.
That's not. I'm going to go to a party, or a campaign rally.
Right.
That's a very big deal for American parents, that, isn't it? Sort of thing that
I think a lot of us would pay anybody to get out of going to
really?
graduation. So I think this is a whole head fake by President Trump.
I never had a formal graduation from university. I just said, why would anyone want to sit through that much Latin? I just don't understand why it would be fun.
It's a psyop.
But Donald Trump's also been told he can't attend the Supreme Court hearing. Now,
that's
so it's
more
another
important.
case. Now, from a lower court in Manhattan. He doesn't need to be there. He would just sit in silence. He'd probably just scupper it a bit more with some comments, on the way in, on the way out, as he often does speak. But in terms of how this court case, what is the argument from Trump's lawyers that he's allowed to do this?
Yeah, it's really based on a couple of, there's a long list of statutes, but one of them is Nixon versus Fitzgerald from 1972. And I think that in that case, they showed that Nixon or presidents in general need that kind of protection, need that immunity. So, there is what they call outer limits, and you can execute your presidential duties, but there's also another level of duties that might not be directly or, mandatory by the president, but still involve the office. And that's really what's going to be decided today. But again, this lawfare has gotten so out of hand, and it's just another example of it.
And this case in Arizona, indicting a number of the former president's advisors, he's not named, but he's considered to be a co-conspirator in this, unindicted. Yeah. But this is the fourth US state to file criminal charges about a fake elector scheme. Now, it's an alleged scheme to flip his defeat in the state and overturn the 2020 election result. Now, the case in Georgia is obviously the one that we know more about, because there's this tape of this phone call to the Attorney General, the state Attorney General, basically saying, come on, find me this number of extra voters. And the clear implication from that, the clear implication is, fix the vote for me so it looks like I've won. What is the actual allegation of what happened in Arizona?
Yeah, and that is similar to the Georgia case in the sense that he was challenging the Republican Party that was managing the election and trying to ensure that all the rules were followed and that there were no irregularities that were terribly obvious. Now, you can argue whether or not there was or not, but the reality is it's okay for a president or any elected official to challenge the results, which is what he was doing. So again, you might not agree with him, but Stacey Abrams did this in 2018. She did it for 4 years, complaining about the election in 2018, and then lost by 10 points.
Yeah, exactly. I've always had an issue with Hillary Clinton and Democrats. They complained about 2016, said it was
illegitimate election.
And again, be careful what you read. Philip Ingram, look, the peaceful transfer of power is the fundamental part of a democracy. It's not just people voting. It's just people going, yes, I lost. And often we see, you see the removal vans in Downing Street in England, but you also see in America, this ceremony, this handing over where the outgoing president and their partner, shake hands, exchange gifts, they sit and have tea together, and they stand there while the next oath of office is taken. It's a really important symbol, isn't it? And I remember there was discussion on American and indeed worldwide media back in 2020 about whether or not, the National Guard were going to have to be sent in to physically remove President Trump from office.
Yeah, well, the old Christian recorder saying, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you. Try telling those two who were killed or injured because words inflamed the crowd and stormed the Capitol building on January the 6th.
More people could have died. People were out for the kill. There are some extraordinary video footage.
Very much so. And whether that was stimulated by Donald Trump's speech alone and everything else that goes into there, it should be a warning symbol for democracy. And when you're getting lawfare coming in to try and influence how democratic processes are going, where you're getting polarization in the media that's supposed to hold people to account, but it's not, it's inflaming everything that's in there. Yeah. That's really worrying. And I fear for US politics.
I worry that our politics is going a similar way. Yeah. I think that's one of my big worries. Yeah. But just on the abortion issue, we just touched on there, Greg Swenson. It's fascinating because, again, so Donald Trump got the support for the evangelical right of the party because basically if he gets in, he can appoint judges to the Supreme Court. And again, some presidents are it's horrible. Very unlucky. They don't see a judge. Largely, they die, or they are close to death when they retire from the bench. He had an opportunity to appoint 3. Basically, got a Conservative majority of the court that will last possibly for decades. And basically, they made that historic Roe v. Wade ruling, basically saying not that abortion was no longer a constitutional right and that it was outlawed, which a lot of people interpreted as. It was just that it was a decision for individual states. It wasn't for the federal government to decide this. Now, we've since seen, I think it's about a third. Was it 20% to a third of American states are now either looking to or already have basically outlawed abortion to all intents and purposes. I mean, if you have it from 6 weeks up to 6 weeks, most women don't even know they're pregnant. But Donald Trump, he knows now this is a vote loser, not a vote winner. Not just among Democrats or among women, but actually among many Republican voters who feel this is a private issue. He's kind of backtracking on this now, isn't he?
No, he definitely has backtracked, and he announced a few weeks ago that it should be left up to the states. There was an argument that the Supreme Court wasn't necessarily saying it should go to the states, but it should go to the legislature. It should, like I was arguing earlier, don't legislate from the bench, which is what Roe v. Wade basically was. Either let the federal government, meaning the Congress, legislate, or send it to the states because individual states have different views, and that's what's happened. What's important for Republicans to articulate this time around, which we didn't do in 2022, is that the basic proposal from the Democrats, the policy of the Democratic Party and Biden is no restrictions up until birth.
Which I think is disgusting.
Taxpayer funded, it is disgusting. And if that's articulated, that's their policy, while the policy of the Republicans is, yes, we're pro-life, but let's leave it up to the states. If you say 12 weeks, like most European countries, 24 weeks, like the UK and the Netherlands, okay, that's fine. Leave it up to the people, leave it up to the voters and the legislature. But this taxpayer funded up until birth polls at 13. It also polls at 18 with Democrats. So most Democrats think it's disgusting.
I mean, just as a woman, as a mum, and especially as someone who's miscarried a number of babies, I'm utterly appalled by that. I think it's absolutely. One day it's legal, the next day it's infanticide. I find it extraordinary. But again, I think the philosophical belief that against abortion is a perfectly legitimate belief that should be taken into account.
And at this point, now that the courts have said, let the people decide, now it's up to...
But we are seeing, are we not, an awful lot of these almost mini referendums coming onto the ballot paper ahead of November so people can vote on these individual measures.
And that's what they've done. And whether I like it or not, I might not agree with it, but that's the people, and they voted. And so you'll see that in Florida, you'll see it in a few states.
And by the way, when you have to make that decision yourself as a woman, then feel free to have more of an opinion. But no, I think men are welcome to have an opinion on this. I'm not sure you get the final say. I'm going to leave it there. Both looking at me in horror now. But
here come the tomatoes.
Yeah, exactly. Really
TV.
good to hear from you. Thank you very much, Dean. Again, I don't know how Donald Trump goes because it's exhausting even just being told about all of these cases that he's facing.
Hard to keep up. It really is.
There you are then. Maybe didn't need to get himself into that mess in the first place, but there we are. I know we'll be seeing much more of you over the coming year. Thank you very much.